Welcome to the Gold Newsletter Podcast, your bank of knowledge of investments, economics, and geopolitics. Go to goldnewsletter.com for our publications and archives to increase your wealth monetarily and educationally.
This is the Gold Newsletter Podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm glad to be your host, Fergus Hodgson, and we are engaging with such a fascinating topic today, budgeting, or the lack thereof in people's lives. And I have Kumiko Love, the budget mom. I'm trying to do an American, what we say mum in New Zealand, but the budget mom. And she is an accredited financial counselor with 8 years experience, and she's been featured in many prominent outlets with her opinions. So she's the perfect lady for the job. Kumiko, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, the predicament is just that everyone knows what a budget is, and yet, I mean, you know the numbers on this. How many people actually, one, prepare a budget, and two, do anything like sticking to it?
The statistics, they range from various outlets, but I know that a lot more people start off creating one, and then the statistics get higher as when we say, do they actually stick to it?
Right.
I think it's really easy to sit down and write some numbers on a piece of paper, but actually finding something that's realistic and works is a lot harder. So people tend to get frustrated, and then they just kind of stop doing it.
Just slow down. When they get frustrated, they're frustrated because they cannot restrain their spending, or frustrated because things are too variable? What is the barrier there?
I think with a lot of people, it starts off with they don't make their budget realistic.
Okay.
And so they sit down without doing any of the legwork and the research on their spending, and they just assign dollar values to categories, thinking that, okay, well, this month I'm going to spend $400 on groceries, but in reality, they're used to a lifestyle where they're spending $800. And so when it comes down to it and they're trying to stick to this monetary number that just isn't working, they get frustrated and they don't know how to cut their spending in ways to get it down to that amount. And so what I recommend a lot of people do is to do some research on your spending, analyze, the last 3 months of your statements, and figure out those realistic numbers before you actually sit down and start creating one. Yeah,
that's true. I mean, the predicament is that anyone can dream what he wants to dream.
Right.
But if you actually go back and look at your numbers, you can't make that up. I mean, you spent it or you didn't. So that is a kind of cold reality. I mean, my sense is very few people do, just because it can become a headache, and then like I said, it is a cold reality. The reason why I particularly wanted to get you on, though, is because I have struggled with this for such a long time. And part of it is that I know you're independent as well, but once you leave, let's say, a salaried job and become maybe more of a traveler and an entrepreneur, setting a monthly budget becomes much more complicated. Do you deal with a lot of people who are more independent?
I do. I know for myself, when I started my business, just adding a business aspect to my budget made it more complicated.
Sure.
Not only are you dealing with variable income at that point, a lot of people don't know how to set themselves up for a salary. So when you are an entrepreneur, and you're having all this flexible income come in, it's hard to know what to budget for when everything varies so greatly.
Yes.
And so what I do, at least for me, I like to average the numbers out.
Okay.
I may not know what next month's income is going to be, but I have a good idea. And that's because I've been tracking my income for, the last 2.5 years that I've had my business. It's also helpful to have what I like to call a revolving account.
Yes.
And that's where you put, if you make surplus money one month, to put that extra money in a revolving account so that you have it when the income is less during certain months.
Right.
So that way it can kind of even out your budget a little bit, makes things a little bit easier to calculate. As far as traveling goes, This is the first year that I'm actually going on an all cash paid vacation.
Oh, wow.
It's the first year that I'm going somewhere without putting it on credit cards.
Mm.
And I think the big thing with traveling is unexpected expenses.
Yes. Okay.
So many people go into a vacation or a traveling plan thinking they have everything figured out, and it never works out that way.
No. Yeah.
So it's the saving for unexpected expenses, even if it's a couple $100s, just to have a cushion in there, for whatever life happens when you're traveling out on the road. So that's one of the things that I made sure to do this year when it comes to the traveling money.
I hear you. I've been traveling too much in my life, to be frank. I've made a commitment that I need to reduce it, but I don't know how successful I've been in that regard. The one point is so prescient or important that travel. I mean, first, it's a luxury. I mean, I think people should see it as not a necessity, and therefore, it is something that you have discretion over when you are trying to get your finances in order. But the second bit is just that the upfront costs of accommodation and flights are just the start. So many hidden costs. I mean, because of course you have to pay more for food. Then you might have taxis or accidents along the way, whatever. And then you might find there are hidden taxes. I traveled to Belize recently, and getting out of the country, they wanted to charge me a $55 tax, which did not please me, of course. I was getting kind of angry about this.
Right, and it gets even more complicated when you start traveling with kids.
Oh, yeah, kill me. Yeah, so
yeah.
So we got these predicaments, and the bit that I like or note from you is that, yeah, in budgets we can dream or theorize, but monitoring your income or your spending, your income and spending streams is perhaps even more effective at informing you as to what your budget should be. And in my own case, I do keep close track of my spending, my accounts, and because of the variability, I tend to just set targets rather than components. I say I want to save this amount per month, and I focus on trying to achieve that rather than trying to have set expenses, because my expenses will go, maybe it'll be higher for food one month or higher for travel another month or whatever it may be, and it gets hard to keep track of. But the one advantage we have in this era is that there is a litany of digital applications or websites or whatever you want to refer to help you. Have you used, or do you recommend, I mean, I don't know, maybe you have some commission with an organization. I don't mind. But is there a platform you recommend?
I don't actually have any sponsorships with any online applications. I do though have readers who reach out to me and say, "Oh my gosh, you need to check out this app on on Android or on Apple. It's amazing." I have used a couple of different apps in my life. I have since moved away, and I now use my own tools, but there are a few apps that I still use for managing my debt.
Okay.
So a couple of those apps, one of them is called Debt Payoff Planner.
Yes.
It's available on Android and on Apple, and they have really, really great software. That's one of them that I recommend. It's called Debt Payoff Planner, and it allows you to see what your debt payoff journey will look like depending on which method you use to pay off your debt. So I'm the type of person where saving money is more important to me than paying off my debt faster, because a lot of my debt that I have super low interest rates.
Okay.
So for me, paying off debt according to interest rate makes a lot more sense to me than, say, paying off the smallest amount of debt. And so it allows you to see over the lifetime of your loans or your debt, how much will you save, how much monthly payments do you need to make. And so it's a great way to just see where exactly you are in your debt payoff journey. Another one that I really, really like, it's called Debt Payoff Assistant.
Yes.
And it's only available on iOS, but I've used that before. I have since moved to the Debt Payoff Planner, but either of those apps are really good. Then there's another one called Debt Tracker.
Right. What about Nerd Wallet? Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah, I have heard of NerdWallet. They have got, actually, over the last year or so, they have, from my understanding, I know that they dropped some of their interfaces with their software, but NerdWallet is really popular among my readers. I think it's because of the simplicity of it.
Sure.
It's not overly complicated. You literally plug in the numbers and it does the stuff for you. But that is a good one as well.
I've tried this NerdWallet one. The one predicament is that you can actually integrate it into your bank account, so all your expenses go through NerdWallet, which I'm sure that's problematic when it comes to privacy. But it just so happens that my bank, they don't work with, unfortunately, so it doesn't. I haven't been able to really utilize it, but it does give you a free credit check, and it gives you recommendations as to how to boost that easily. So that alone, as far as I'm concerned, is worth you downloading it and giving it a try.
With the whole credit check thing, I have been a big supporter and a huge fan of Credit Karma.
Okay.
For years. It's what basically helped me in the 5 years that I was paying off massive amounts of debt when I graduated college.
Yeah.
It was actually one of the first tools that I used to figure out what my credit score was.
Okay.
Because when I graduated college, I had no idea about how important your credit score was or your credit report. And so with Credit Karma, not only do they keep track of your credit score and what's going on with your report, but they send you notifications if anything changes.
Oh, wow.
And so that's what I love for the security purposes of it, because if a new account is added to your credit report, they will send you an email letting you know that something has changed on your credit report. And to me, that's huge, because it can tell you why or why not your credit score has either jumped or it went down.
So that one is Credit Karma, K-A-R.
Credit Karma.
Yeah, M-A. Right, and that is the predicament too. I mean, I'm 35 years old, and I wish that I had become more financially literate a decade ago, of course. We all get to these things later than we should. But you said, why don't you, I mean, one of the interesting parts of your website is just your personal story. I suspect that's what makes it relatable or interesting to people. It's not just some kind of cold list of financial recommendations. You weave it into your life story. So how did you go from this graduate who didn't know anything about credit scores and wasn't really paying attention? What stimulated you to make a turnaround?
Well, when I graduated college with a finance degree, my major was finance, I got hired on with a local financial firm where I work for a wealth management firm, Financial Advisors. And one of the things that happened when I first started, within my first week, my financial advisor sat me down and said, you need to create a budget. And even though I graduated with a finance degree, personal finance, such as budgeting and debt, was not something that I learned during the whole 4 years that I went to college. And so when he said this to me, I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I sat down and I created a budget. And that's when it was like a huge slap in the face.
Why?
Because I realized how much debt I had actually accrued during my years in school. It was something that I knew, but I had it in the back of my mind because I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't have the income to pay for it, so I wasn't going to deal with it. But when I started this job here and I was forced to write down the numbers, it was like, oh my gosh, like this is getting out of hand. That's when I started working on a budget. That's when I started tackling my debt. When I had my son 5 years ago, that's when it really started happening for me. My motivation completely changed, because what was happening for me was before having my son, I was doing everything for me in my life, making my life better. But when you introduce a child into the picture, it's no longer about you. It's about this life that you're providing for somebody else.
Yeah.
And so for me, my son has been my biggest why. He's been my motivation to do everything that I do, especially with my finances. Not only do we want, as parents want to provide financially for our kids, but we want to be able to give them things that we, weren't able to have. And so I started out with all this debt. And then as I was going through my job in the finance industry, I started learning all these really cool things. And it personal finance really became a passion, and so I decided to pursue my accredited financial counseling designation because I wanted to help people who were in similar situations as I was. And as I went through that program, I started learning all these great things that I kept saying to myself, I wish I knew this when I was tackling my debt, when I was learning to budget. This is the information I wish I had. And there were some nights where I got home and it's I just wanted to scream from the rooftops. This is, it was a aha moment. This is what people need to be doing. And so one night I opened up my computer and I'm I'm going to write a post. It was something that I had learned about credit reports that day, and I'm the world needs to hear this. They're missing out on all this great information. And so I started writing just as an outlet to get all this crazy information out of my head, and I wanted to help people. That was my ultimate goal with the Budget Mom. It still is my ultimate goal. A lot of people who start blogging, they started out as a hobby, and then they realize they can monetize it. And monetizing it then becomes their only goal. For me and the Budget Mom, it's not my full-time job. It is a side hustle. It is a side job. And because of that, I'm able to keep it exactly as what it was when it started, and that's to help people, to help women all over the world and give them all this information that I wish that I had when I was going through my financial journey. And so that's kind of how the Budget Mom started.
Do you want to rub elbows with the best minds in the precious metals and mining industry? You can on the Money, Metals, and Mining Cruise from May 28th to June 7th, 2018. Explore the jewels of the Mediterranean while discovering the latest strategies to successfully invest in precious metals and mining stocks. It's a perfect blend of adventure, learning, and luxurious leisure aboard the Crystal Serenity, always a popular destination. Cabins will sell out fast. Call cruise experts at 800-797-9519 to learn more, or visit our website, goldnewsletter.com/cruise.
I really appreciate the sentiment, because one thing which surprises me is that we live obviously in an era when the information on personal finance is more available than ever before. All the tools, information, the options are just right at your fingertips. And yet, perhaps it is just a fear, I don't know. Yet people don't seem to be digesting it, maybe?
I think it's more to do with information overload.
Okay.
When you talk about a budget and you go onto Google and you write in how to create a budget, you get all these different articles with 1,000 different ways on how to create a budget. You have the 50-20 rule, you have zero-based budgeting, you have percentage budgeting, you have the cash envelope method. So when you talk about the word budget, there's literally hundreds of different choices of how to do it. And so people get extremely overwhelmed. And budgeting itself is overwhelming, but when you're thinking about all these different ways to do it, it becomes overwhelming. And so people are nope, I'm not looking at that. That's too much. And so they ignore it. What happens when our brains are overloaded and we're overwhelmed? We ignore it. We don't want to see it. And so I think that's one of the hardest things about budgeting is finding a method and a system that works for you and your family. And that's what I tell my readers is, this is how I budget my money, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that's the only way to do it. Because my way of doing it for my life with my son, I'm a divorced mom.
Okay.
So it's me and my son, and I have a boyfriend that I live with. My situation might not be the same as, say, a single mom who has 5 kids. I think it really has to do with just the information overload, because there's just so much of it. And so it's a matter of just sitting down, and sometimes, hey, you might spend 6 months just trying to find a method that works. But in the end, finding that one method, it's all worth it.
Well, the reason I agree that it is information overload and people don't know where to start and they don't know who to believe, and of course they suspect, maybe rightly or wrongly, that people are giving them information with ulterior motives or trying to sell them something. But There are a few statistics that maybe motivate us to address this. One is that there has been a 7% increase in the last year in credit card debt. So it's about $1 trillion is owned, which means about $3,000 for every single American. And the average household that has credit card debt, this is from nerdwallet.com, it just says the average household credit card debt is $15,983. This is, I mean, obviously we know that these interest rates are about 20% or just very punitive. So
Right.
if people are carrying those kind of debts, something has gone wrong along the way. Not only has it gone wrong along the way, but now they don't seem to know how to get out of it. And
Right.
I mean, this is when they call the accredited financial counselor and say, "What do I do?" Right? But
Right.
why? I guess what I'm trying to say is, how do we break down this barrier between the people who are specialists like you and all these people across the country, millions, who have these huge debts but don't seem to know how to get to the right person to help them resolve or find a way to perhaps consolidate their debt or set up some kind of plan, because they're not doing it. They're carrying these balances
Right.
over.
Right. Doing it by yourself isn't working.
Yeah.
And hey, sometimes we do need that extra support, and sometimes we do need to reach out to people who may have knowledge that we don't have. One thing you can do is, I got my designation through a really great company, AFCPE, and they have a website where you can literally type in your zip code, and it will give you a list of all the financial counselors in your area who are designated and have the experience to help you.
Okay.
And that's one way to find that extra outlet of support. I think one of the things, to jump back on households, the increase in debt, I think what's kind of happened is we are really living beyond our means.
Okay.
With the huge increase in social media, it's not hard to get on there and wish sometimes that your life was different. You see all these people who are seeming to live these perfect lives and have all this great things and big houses and nice cars and nice clothes, and it's sometimes, and I know I've struggled with this, especially in my earlier days when I was going through college and just getting out.
Okay.
And so we try to mimic that lifestyle, even though we can't afford it.
Right.
And so I think it has to do with, we need to stop wanting more than we have. And it's something that I've really learned since my son was born, is just appreciating what I have around me. And I'm not going to lie, there are still times where I find myself at the mall looking for a new outfit, and I have to kind of step back and be like, this is maybe what I want now, but it's not what I need. And so I think it has a lot to do with our spending choices, and not only that, but why we spend. And it's something that has a lot to do with self-discovery and being honest with yourself on why you're spending the money that you're spending. And sometimes that reality is really hard to confront, and it was for me, and it's still a struggle for me, because as you know, as a blogger, you live on social media.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it is still a struggle, but I've learned to deal with it, and I've learned to be honest with myself and know that's who I am, which is a big reason why I don't carry credit cards anymore. I don't carry one.
Oh, wow.
Because I know, not one, because I know myself too well. That I know myself that if I get to that point where I'm envious,
yeah,
or I'm having, not as much self-confidence as I should have, my reasons for spending drastically change. And I find myself sitting there giving myself all these excuses on why it's okay to spend that money that I don't have. And I start telling myself, well, I can just pay it off later. I know that about myself. That's me being honest with myself. I'm not ashamed to say it. But because I know that about myself and I'm being honest, I don't carry a credit card, and I won't, because I'm not to that point in my life where I can trust myself to use them the way they should be used. That's
actually a recurring theme we have on the show. One of the earlier guests, his name slips me right now, but he just mentioned he gave these 3 tools for young investors, and he basically explained the way that investing with a plan helps to curb your maybe instincts, the way of going about it with impulses rather than with logic. And so in your case, you know that your impulse is to, I guess, get the prettiest dress on social media, and you just know that's a temptation you don't want to have to deal with. So it's better to deal with it earlier on than at the moment.
Right. Yep. You just need to confront it and be honest, and then you need to do things that prevent it from happening. And one of the ways that I prevent it from happening is not having credit cards.
Right.
I paid off my credit cards almost 6 years ago. It took me a very, very long time to get out of them. And when you say, the average American has $15,000, to some that may seem like a little, to some that may seem like a lot. But when you're paying over 20% interest, it's going to take a while to pay that off, especially with a normal salary, a normal income.
Yeah. I mean, of course, that's just the mean. I mean, of course, many people, ideally, I mean, I don't know the breakdown, but I assume many people who hold credit cards do not have a balance at all, right? They just pay it off each month, and so there's no balance. So that means that the actual average, in terms of the people who have debt, is much greater than $16,000. But regardless, let's say you're making $50,000 average income or whatever it may be, that few $1,000s of interest payments every year is going to hurt you a lot. Let's say, $15,000, 20%, that's $3,000 just in interest, not even paying anything back.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
I see. Okay. Well, I hope this has motivated people to make change. The website of Kumiko, the Budget Mom, is just thebudgetmom.com, and the blog is just thebudgetmom.com/blog. So Kumiko, and I will also share your Twitter account. Any other place that you recommend for us to follow your work?
Right now, I'm really upgrading and starting to do more Instagram.
Okay.
And I'm using it as an outlet to share videos. I'm going to start doing more videos on realistic budgeting because I feel sometimes seeing it is better for people than just reading it. And so I've had a lot of readers reach out to me and said, hey, can you actually show me what you're talking about? And so that's a platform that I'm going to start utilizing a lot more. So my Instagram is just the Budget Mom.
Great.
And you can follow me there.
Okay, Kumiko, I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Bye-bye.